Welcome to the DFO Rundown podcast with Frank Seravalli and Jason Gregor on dailyfaceoff.com. Delivered by DoorDash.
Welcome to episode 62 of the DFO Rundown. I'm Jason Gregor along with Frank Seravalli. Our show is brought to you by Fantrax. Of course, Fantrax, you can join it. Sign up for your fantasy league. Go to fantrax.com/DFO Rundown to register, and you could win an autographed Nathan McKinnon jersey. Guy who's going to be in the running for the Hart most likely again, potentially for the Art Ross. Pretty dynamic player. Probably going to be on the first line for Team Canada at the Olympics with McDavid, I would assume. I hope. I want to see him play together. I want to see the best players play with the best players. So go to fantrax.com. We'll see if you're the best player in fantasy. Frank, how you doing?
I'm good, Jay. What's going on? We had a little hiatus. I missed you for the Mike Rupp episode, and I've been bouncing all around the world.
Yeah, I know. I see that. You're in Switzerland, one of your buddies' final seasons of pro hockey, so support him. So that's a lot of fun. And actually, it feels like a month since we've actually done a live pod together, so it's a good little off time. So we got lots to catch up on today on the show. I want to start, Frank, with the big topic. We're going to get to some key RFAs in a second, but I talked to a few NHL. They're still uncertain on exactly what the guidelines will be for unvaccinated players. And last I checked, there was between 50 to 100, give or take the number, of players who weren't vaccinated. Now, that, of course, can change with every day. Some maybe get it more. We know there was a bump when the NHL announced that unvaccinated players would definitely be limited in where they go on the road and such, but still haven't got 100% confirmation, Frank, on what it's going to mean for travel, and more importantly, how many potential games these players might have to miss due to state, provincial, national travel laws on who can get in and out of countries.
Yeah, it's really interesting, and it's obviously all still kind of fluid. Not necessarily the COVID protocol for this season. I'm actually looking at the document right here. It's 27 pages and it's very detailed. I think the thing is, they're still waiting on what some of these national and provincial restrictions might be, specifically with regards to Canada. I mean, the NHL's protocols as a whole are pretty cut and dry in terms of they have, with every subject, with whatever it comes to, this is what the rules are for fully vaccinated individuals, and this is what the rules are for unvaccinated individuals. And the truth is, it's going to be really difficult for players, and I think by design, it's made difficult for players that are unvaccinated. Your testing requirement is daily instead of once every 3 days, like it is for fully vaccinated individuals. And, your restrictions on the road are much different. You can't leave your room. You can't go out to dinner. You can't do all the other things that fully vaccinated individuals can do. You have to wear a face covering and a mask around the rink. Like, all those things are just a lot different. And so I think what that's done is players that have been on the fence heading into the end of the summer as to whether or not they wanted to get vaccinated, it's pushed a number of players sort of over the finish line if they weren't there already. And the other part of it too is there was probably a lot of players that had COVID at a certain point that said, okay, I had it and I'm through it. Why do I need to get vaccinated? And I think that's the other part of the conversation that's definitely not been talked about, but I think is certainly lingering in players' minds. Like, look, I've already been there and done that. I know there's other variants and I could still get it again, but I feel like I'm pretty well protected. Why do I then need to inject a vaccine into me? And so I think there's some frustration on that front. But like I said, the rules are very, very clear, in terms of how things look with and without vaccination.
Yeah, if you look at the numbers, though, if you have COVID, that your antibodies only last a certain time, just like why they're starting with boosters now on the vaccine, which is how a lot of vaccine historically have worked anyway. So I think if you get it, they're right. They have some antibody for a short period of time, but it doesn't last. Like, it's not life altering, unfortunately, for some people who've had it. So to me, though, it's really interesting, Frank, because I've heard a few names that are pretty key pieces to some teams. And if all of a sudden those players can't go on a 5-game road trip or 3-game or 4-game road trip, that's pretty impactful. And the other thing that I haven't got confirmation on is, so if that happens, are they still on the active 23-man roster? Does that mean their team can only carry 22 eligible players for those games? Right? Like those things haven't even been announced.
Yeah, and look, I haven't had a chance to fully pick through the document, which is, like I said, long and meandering and very detailed.
I almost got through it, Frank. But I'll tell you, it takes a few readings, because unless you're like, I have respect for lawyers to have to read this stuff all the time.
Or the person that at each club that's the sort of designated COVID person to really monitor and handle everything. There's a lot to it. But with regards to pay, it's pretty simple. Like if you're an unvaccinated player, and this is what I was talking about when it remains fluid, is there is lots of talk. I don't think there's been a definitive date yet, but I believe the federal government of Canada has said we're instituting a policy where anyone entering our country, regardless of whether they're a citizen or not, you must be vaccinated. And it starts whatever the date is. Is it October, 31st, whatever the date, the number ends up being. That's when things are going to start to get really interesting in terms of the travel, as you mentioned, because if you can't go on a 5-game trip and it's a 10-day trip or an 11-day trip, well, with pay, it's really simple. Yes. The NHL season is broken down generally. I don't know what it is this year. It's generally around 186 days. So if you're, I don't know, throw out a player, Sidney Crosby, and you make $8.7 million, you take and I'm not saying he is or isn't vaccinated. I actually don't know the answer. 8.7 million divided by 186 days, that comes out to a certain number. Then you multiply that by 10 or 11 days that you're going to miss, and that's the pay that'll be subtracted from your paycheck. So it not just, and I think what's important here, it's not just about the money. That's big, but it's also about leaving your team in a spot where you wouldn't be able to compete and leaving a hole for someone else to fill, and potentially not with help on the roster. So those are all the sort of facets that get connected to it.
Yeah, no, to me, it was more so I understand all the pay. Like if you're a $5 million player, if you miss 10 days, it's $270,000, right? Because it's about $27,000 a day is how it works. So you can do that for any other player and figure out the number. It's fairly simple, but it's more so to me, like last year we had the taxi squad, right? So I'm just curious if there's going to be some sort of, do you punish? Because a team can't force someone. You can't pin them down and give them the jab. So does the team automatically get punished if they have a player who can't go? And while he doesn't get paid, I understand that. Does the team then for 5 games, do they get the extra spot? Does it count against the cap? I'm just curious what they're going to look at to do for that sort of thing. So it's just it's a little wrinkle for me, because what if a team has, some teams have 2 players, Frank. What all of a sudden?
Some teams have more than that.
Yeah. So now you won't have an extra spare or anything like that on a road trip. So I do wonder if the NHL is, I'm assuming they're looking at it, but I haven't been able to get confirmation from some of the presidents I've spoke to. So, because they don't know yet. They're still, that hasn't been finalized from what I understand, because they still don't know 100%, as you talked about, the Canadian government, and because Canadian government might not be in power. You got a new election coming, right?
True.
So that's why
I hadn't even thought about that.
Yeah. That's the big change here, is because potentially if the Liberal government doesn't win the election, which happens before the start of the regular season, well, then maybe things are different. And I think that that's something they probably have to wait for.
And you can bet that the NHL is monitoring that election very closely.
Oh, 100%. Now, things that people are monitoring very closely, in certain markets anyway, are RFA signings. There's some unsigned still. Here we are 9 days away from opening day of training camp. And Kaprizov in Minnesota has been an interesting one. I guess he's not playing in the KHL.
He hasn't to this point. And I know that was the threat, and something that I reported on earlier this summer. And part of that, I believe, is insurance related. You have to protect against future loss of income if you were to get injured. And not only is that policy expensive, but my understanding is it's actually a lot more difficult to get when you play in Russia. For whatever reason, insurers don't like players playing over there, and it becomes, exponentially more expensive to get. I feel like in some ways that'd be the easiest way to get the contract done, is have this guy get ready to play his first game in the KHL and then see how the Minnesota Wild react. But they haven't pushed the button on yet and haven't gotten to that point. the Kaprizov camp says that remains a possibility. And I think moving forward, this has been really difficult. This situation has, I think, at times gone to some dark places. Maybe these talks have gone off the rails and they found a way to get it back on and keep it there. But I think there's still a few lingering issues on the Kaprizov front that have prevented it from getting done. I think they're relatively close on term. I think both sides kind of agree it's somewhere in that 4 to 5 year range. I think they're in the general ballpark of an AAV, although I guess it depends on which side you talk to. Mike Russo put out something a couple weeks back, something in the 5 year range at $9 million AAV. I do think that there's some legs to that. Obviously, if that was it, it could be done or closer to done. And then the other part too, which has been a real big sticking point, I think, has been both signing bonus and also whatever the clauses look like when Kaprizov can have a no trade or a no move. He can't for the first 3 years, but I think in those last 2 years, they've been seeking a no move or something like that, and the Wild are not really willing to budge on that front. Maybe something more like a modified no trade. So it's gone back and forth. I think as we're chatting on Monday, September 13th, it's probably not in the best spot, but there's also not a lot of runway here. I think I mentioned this before. With a Russian player having to come over to get a visa, the process takes so much longer now. It used to be something that could get done in 3 to 5 days. It might be 3 weeks to get something like that done this time around, given the COVID situation, offices being closed. It's not that easy. So we're potentially talking at this point, Monday, September 13th, it not being done, that he's not there for the start of training camp in 10 days. And obviously he's not going to be there anyway without a deal being done. You can't just come to the US without a contract and a way to work. So you can't even get a visa. So it's going to be really interesting to watch this all unfold here as we get close to this sort of deadline of training camp starting.
So that's one to follow. The Tkachuk, there seems to be more cordial conversations on that front. I see Sean Simpson talking lots about the 8x8 number, and that's what they're looking at. Tkachuk's a very interesting player because he's kind of a rare breed in the sense that he's got the potential to be a legit power forward, right? He can score goals. He
already physical, is, right?
He can fight. He's a young player. I'm not sure if he'll ever put up massive numbers. I could be wrong on that, right? I don't know if he's a 100-point player or anything. There's not many of those guys, maybe not even 90. But with Tim Stützle coming, I think the chance for Tkachuk to be even more offensive is definitely there, because when great players play with great players, you have a tendency to have better numbers. It's just simple. So
as the team gets better too, think about matchups and everything else that come into play with the Sens.
Yeah. And I look at Tkachuk's one where if you look at his numbers to date, he's yet to score 50 points. Some might say, geez, 8 million's ridiculously high. I can understand that point of view, but I also understand that I think Ottawa's twofold here. They want another player to commit to their organization, right? Shabbat did it. Batherson did it for 6 years as well. And if you get Tkachuk, at least you kind of have a semblance of who's going to be your core. Stützle in a few years, I would think would be the other main guy that they would add to that. And then like other organizations, they got to try to find a young goalie who could fall into that regard. But 8x8, does that seem unrealistic to you, Frank? Or because we've heard that number for so long, ultimately that's what's going to get done?
It actually feels light to me because all the reasons that you mentioned. I just also look at his brother too. If you look at Matthews' production in his first 2 years in the league, right sort of under that 50-point number, another guy that is a straw that stirs his team's drink. Brady's actually a little bit bigger and is probably a better goal scorer, although that remains to be seen. He's already hit
from distance better.
He's already hit 20 twice. 22 and 21 in his first 2 NHL seasons. And then last year, it was a 25-goal pace over a course of a full 82-game season. And so you look at Matthew and you look at his first 2 years, and Obviously, we don't have the benefit of Brady having a full NHL season. He didn't take quite that next step forward that Matthew did in year 3, getting to 77 points and 34 goals. And you talk about playing with good players, the impact that he had in Calgary. Like, I look at Brady and I say, for all those reasons you mentioned, playing on a team that's getting better, playing with really good players, I don't see any reason why he can't be that sort of point per game player, 80 plus, 85, score 30, 35 every year. And to get a player like that to commit long term, if you're sitting on his side, you're saying, well, wait a second, I don't know exactly what the NHL financial landscape looks. We actually have a pretty good idea for the next 4 years or 5 years, given this CBA and how it works with paying off the NHL owners and the $1 billion debt that the players have. You know that the cap at most is only going to be going up $1 million a year. This following season, after this one, it's going to be 82.5. If you're lucky, you get to 83.5 the following year. It's not increasing a lot, but what you want to protect against is in the years 6, 7, and 8 in that deal, that you want to make sure that you're being properly paid for what you're bringing to the table. And as someone who's only 21, he'll only be on an 8-year deal, 29 when it's expiring. Like, you probably, and I think, some of it's been out there, you probably want to be in that $10 million AAV range for the last 3 to 4 years of the deal. The question is, what do the first 4 to 5 years of the deal look like? And then how do you mash those two AAVs together? Just in doing my homework and talking to people around the league, I think the word you used, cordial, was very appropriate. I think they've had, I think, 3 to 4 really solid negotiating sessions with the Sens. I don't really think there's a threat of an offer sheet. Like, it's a really difficult one to make because the Sens have so much cap space, and you'd have to offer some crazy long-term deal that would really also probably put your own team in peril to do it. They had a marathon negotiating session in Toronto not that long ago, and I think this is one of those ones that's going to get done. I think the question is, if it is long-term, and where does that AAV ultimately end up? My guess is it's somewhere north of 8.
Yeah, I think they're asking then a lot to hope that you can get a long-term deal and get the maximum close to $10 million at the end. I think is dreaming in Technicolor. Brad Marchand, David Pasternak, McKinnon. You can't get both. So if you want to get the big number in the last 4 years, then don't sign a long-term deal. The long-term deal is signed to get you guaranteed long-term. You know exactly what you get. You get a little bit more comfort. But there's got to be a sacrifice. You can't get the long-term deal when you haven't scored 50 points and get $10 million because you think you might be a $10 million player. I can't think of a contract.
Well, he did score 50 points last year if you extrapolate the numbers out.
But sure, either way, to me, $10 million, 50 points is not
over an 82-game season. It was 53 points.
Yeah.
But it's also the goals, and it's also how young he is, how bad the team has been while he's been producing it, and what's to come for a guy that continues to grow, continues to get more comfortable, plays with better players. So, if you're saying, but say $70 million divided by 8, you can structure the years however you want. That comes out to 875 as an average.
Yeah.
There's a way to get $10 million in the back end of that deal and only be making 5, 6, 7, whatever the number is to start, and ultimately sort of work your way up there.
No, I get it. And Ottawa has tons of cap space, but to me, there's never been a precedent for that contract. I can't think of one, right? Like when Nathan McKinnon, who by the way had 52 points or 53 as a high, and then 60 when he got his $6 million, then he went back to 53 for a year, then he exploded. Pasternak, Marchand, when those guys all signed their contracts, if Tkachuk really wants to win, because that's, to me, at the end of the day, if you want your team to be competitive, you could go the Darnell Nurse route. If you want to get your big money when you think you're actually, putting up numbers to deserve it, then go bridge deals. Right?
I mean, I think ultimately, and I'm just crunching the numbers as we're talking about it, hadn't really thought about it beforehand. But if you look at, let's say you were to structure it and you're saying, okay, the first 5 years of the deal, we're going to give you $40 million for. So that's $8 million a year. Okay. And then you look at the last, that leaves 3 years at 30 million. So 10 million a year for the last three. Like that gets you to that 875 number. Do you think that's unreasonable?
I do, honestly, because we don't know for certain how the player, it's all a projection, right? And so that,
but that's what you're saying as the team side. But if you're the player side,
well, of course you're always going to say, no, I'm getting like, I think you're coming more at the player. So I'm coming more from the team side. Like to me, there's not much like the,
but unless you're going to get that number, why would you sign long-term? Because what you're doing ultimately is just limiting your income.
Well, sure. But if you're going to get 8 mil, Frank, long-term, like the 875K at the end of the year, like if I'm doing an investment and I can guarantee that I'm going to get 64 mil for sure instead of 70, I'll be like, well, yeah, I'll take 64 because guess what? I might have to then sign a bridge term and I get 7 mil or 8 mil on my bridge. And what if I all of a sudden don't become the 75-point player? What if in the next 2 years I only score 55 points, right? So there's still a risk both ways. Like getting 64 schmil is that's a lot of bills. And
it is. I just think, I don't know. I think you end up leaving money on the table. And I think for the player, I just think it, otherwise say, okay, we'll sign a 2-year deal or whatever it is. We'll sign a 3-year deal.
Yeah.
I mean, I think the Svechnikov one has really kind of thrown everyone through a loop because I think almost everyone universally that I've talked to, 8 years, 62 million at that 775 AAV has viewed that as a very team-friendly contract.
Well, potentially, right? Like I think sometimes.
But I think that's also potentially like even Brady Tkachuk at 875, watching him continue to grow and get better and better, 875 I think could be really team-friendly in 3 years. The question is how soon do you get to the point where it's team-friendly? And for a team that has so much cap space, actually still needs to spend to get to the floor, you lock him up now. You know what your obligation is to Brady Tkachuk moving forward all the way through, basically until he's, in some NHL circles, they would say past his prime at 29, 30. You've bought all of the best years of Brady Tkachuk.
Yeah, no doubt.
And so what you're doing essentially is you could get him cheaper on the 2 or 3 year deal now. You could get him at, I don't know what the number would be, 7.
Yeah.
Like look at Matthews' number and whatever that is. But then you get to the point where Matthews going to be next summer, or he could actually negotiate now. And it's going to cost you a lot more than that. It's going to be costing you 9.5, maybe. Who knows where that number ends up? But you could save yourself a lot of heartache later to say, to spend a little bit more now.
Potentially, but I just look at people thought Mitch Marner was going to be a great friendly team contract, and now 2 years in, people are like, wow, Mitch Marner's overpaid because live up to
has anyone ever said that? Like it's $11 million. It's on a different.
But look at Svechnikov. 2 years, he's been 61 and 62-point player. And we talk like 7.7. Oh, what a steal. What are you expecting him to get? A steal to me is Nathan McKinnon, David Pastrnak, Brad. Those are
But
steals.
these are that's a different, that was not even in the CBA. That's a different contract. It's different. It's different everything. You can't to bring the McKinnon. That's what we're saying now is this Svechnikov deal is the McKinnon version, or could be the McKinnon version of this CBA.
Yeah.
That's the point. It's like 6.3 at the time. Look at what McKinnon was when he signed it. It was July 8th, 2016. He was coming off of 63, 38, and 52 points, which is exactly where Brady Tkachuk is right now when you average it all out.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing.
And we're saying, look at that number. That deal is so team friendly. That's 6.3. We're talking about a new CBA in a new time when the cap, when we get past this $1 billion debt that the NHL players pay off, the cap's it's going to be $100 million, or should be. So maybe. It's going to be high 90s at the very least. It has to be in order for the math to make sense for the players to have paid everything off. So what we're talking about is the same thing. 775 for Svechnikov in 2016 is already damn close to the McKinnon number in 2016, 6.3 to 775. You're talking about the same thing.
No. Here's a big difference, Frank. You're assuming that Svechnikov is now going to improve by 30 points. That's why McKinnon became great, because he was a 90-plus point player.
He was already he was already earning that number is the point. He was close to that 6.3 number.
But if he only
and then he went and he added 40 points to his total. But he didn't in the first year. The first year of his deal, he had 53 points again and 16 goals. And you'd say, oh, that's disappointing.
That's what I'm saying. To me, Nathan McKinnon became a great team-friendly deal because he skyrocketed to a level that no one thought. If Svechnikov stays at 60 points, then 7.75 isn't team-friendly. It's a fair deal for both parties. And I look at Brady Tkachuk and I look at Svechnikov.
But I think Svechnikov is an easy 80-point player.
Why?
Just based on what I've seen and the impact that he's had. And Brady Tkachuk is a franchise centerpiece player. He just is. I
think we're low.
He drags that. It's not all points. The points are super important. He's gonna score 30 goals. He could score north of that. He could easily be a 40-goal scorer, in my opinion. And it's every other piece that Brady Tkachuk brings to that team. You look at all the older players on that team. Brady Tkachuk is tight with them. He's tight with the young guys. He's got the personality and all those things, and he drags his team emotionally into the fight every single night. That's why you pay him, because you're saying this deal is going to be a bargain 3 years from now. It might hurt in the beginning, but who cares? We have so much cap space. And we also know we can plan out on a big board our future of what this team is going to look like cap-wise for all these next number of years, because we have achieved cost certainty.
Well, that's why you do it at $8 million. But to suddenly go way higher, to me, I don't see the necessity to it, because I think at times, too often in the NHL, people want to overrate a certain player's importance. Like, to me, team-friendly deals that people mocked at the time. Look at Leon Draisaitl. He's the second leading scorer in the NHL. He's won a Hart Trophy. He's won a Art Ross. Is Svechnikov and Tkachuk going to do that? I don't think so. Right? I'd be stunned, actually, if either one does it. So there's certain levels of where, like, there's.
I think you're. I don't know. I think you're missing the boat. I think these are superstar offensive players.
Wow. See, I think we throw out superstar. Like, what's Draisaitl then?
Is there a level above superstar? Yeah, I mean.
Yeah, but he's 100-plus point guy. These guys are 60 point, and I like both players.
But look at where Draisaitl was when he signed it. Like, you're like
77 points.
Okay.
Yeah, but that's 24.
What was he before then?
Tkachuk. It's 24 more points, man. Like, you can't go like Tkachuk. Even he had
a 37-game season where it looked like he couldn't keep up in his rookie year.
He was not. You're talking when he went back to junior. That doesn't count.
Okay, then what did he do the next year? He did exactly what Brady did when he was the same age. Like, why are you saying for him that it's possible, but for Brady it's not? I don't understand.
He was never a 100-point player in junior, Frank.
That's not always the best predictor.
Well, it is a lot of it. If I'm playing the odds, it is, right? Okay. So you can't. I just think, look at the NHL offense. There's not suddenly going to be all these guys scoring all these points. It's just unrealistic. It doesn't happen in the NHL, right? Like, unfortunately,
I love the debate because I think it's awesome, but I think you're missing the boat on his impact.
Yeah, and the thing is, I like Brady Tkachuk. So people are listening and say, no,
apparently
I like
not.
Brady Tkachuk. Yeah. But $8 million is an unreal deal for Brady Tkachuk. I think it's not a slap in the face. It's not unfair.
No one's saying it's a slap in the face, but all I'm saying is they know at that point that they're leaving money on the table, and then that's just how a deal doesn't get done.
But are they? That's the thing. Like, we can speculate, but I'm not sold they are, right? I'm not sold they are. That's all. Like, I'm not sold that Brady Tkachuk is going to be a 90.
So you're telling me that when Leon Draisaitl signed his deal, 8 years, $68 million, you thought then that he was going to be a 105 or 110 point player?
No, but I thought he'd be
I want to find the tapes actually. Or were you sitting back there and one of those people saying, man, this is a massive overpayment?
No, you can ask anybody who listened to my show, Frank. People ripped on me because I said Leon Draisaitl is going to be an elite offensive player and he's going to be an over 90-point player. Because 100 points, to think a guy can score 100 points, like Draisaitl's only one of 2 players who have even scored 50 goals in the last 7 years, right? So yeah, I didn't expect him to score because if people thought he'd score 100 points, well, then he would have got 11 million, right? So even the team, even Draisaitl's camp, but I just think we're starting to project. All we have to do is go back and look at the last 10 years of how many players score 100 points.
I don't think he's going to be a 100-point player, but I think he's going to be point per game right in that neighborhood, 80, 75, 82, 85 points and 30 plus goals. I think he's there. I really do. And I think at that number, it's not unrealistic if you think that that's the type of production you're going to get and buy for the next 8 years.
Yeah. Well, if he could get 8 mil at 8 years, I'd sign it if I was him, because I don't think you're
okay. So do you want to place a wager
on what he signed for?
Yeah. Where do you think
Ottawa might not stand firm, because you're right, Frank, they have tons of cap space. And so teams don't look too long ahead, but just because a player gets more money doesn't mean it's a good contract for the player, but it doesn't mean it's going to be a good contract for the team.
Mm-hmm. So what's your prediction on?
Oh, he probably gets 8.
I feel like this needs to be a buy or sell question with Tyler. It's like we need to put money on it.
8.25 is what he gets, because the talks all being about 8 million, so they'll want a little higher. So I'll say 8.25.
Okay. I say, I don't know, what would you call this? Like the price is right. I'll take anything north, 8.26 and north.
And then what do you think his points, what's his best point year right now in the next 8 years of that contract? What's the most points he's going to get?
90.
Okay. I'll say he gets 83.
The best year. And what about the number of goals? Because that matters.
I think Tkachuk could, well, he's going to get to play with Stützle, and that's going to be the key. Stützle's a hell of a player. I really like him a lot. So,
like, how else do you, like, what about these other guys in the Sens, man? Like, they could have 2 other guys that are as good as Stützle. Like, Josh Norris is going to be a stud.
I like Josh Norris, but buddies, Tim Stützle's he is really, really good. Like, I think Stützle's going to be their offensive key player moving forward there.
Shane Pinto's a good player. Like, they've just got really good players.
Got some potential guys there, yeah. But I'll say Brady in the next 8 years, because see, to me, doing it once is one thing. Like, what's he going to average is probably the better one. And I don't think he averages 80 points in the next 8 years at all. And I don't think he averages 35 goals.
Okay.
It'll be fun to see. Now, on an opposite one, Hughes and Pettersson. Do you see any way that either one of them can get a long-term deal, considering that the Canucks currently only have 10 mil, a little bit in change in cap space? Is this bridge deal for both?
I think it has to be. And I think in some ways for Pettersson, it was probably always trending that way once he had the injury. And, obviously you get him in that rookie year and he just looks like such a magical player. And even the second year, he did basically the same thing again, 2 66-point seasons. And then has the injury last year and misses 30 games. And obviously COVID, all like that year, you just punt on that year. But even the bridge deal is going to be pretty expensive, given those 2 years that he had. And then you look at the overall team cap space, 10.6 million right now heading into the season. And then like dividing 10.6 between those 2 guys, even on bridge deals, is not fun. To do it on long-term deals, I don't see how it's possible. I really don't.
Unless they have a trade of somebody of significance of like 3+ mil, right? That's the only way I can see it.
And then I'm saying, who's that person? Like, I honestly think that the Canucks maybe got themselves into a little bit of trouble. Like, I think the Connor Garland trade, obviously they were able to ship a bunch of players out. The Ekman-Larsson cap hit, doesn't help and isn't easy, but their defense has been revamped in a big way, and they have some experience there now. Like, I love the addition of Connor Garland, south of 5 million. Like, I think he's a guy that scores 25 this year. But I think like where they got themselves into a little bit of trouble is like that Tanner Pearson deal at 3.25 for 3 years, like I think I would have liked to have seen that wait a little bit until after the season, like just play out the year and see if you can get it done. And but like that 3.25 would be really valuable right now. Like you said, unless they can trade a player of 3 million, like that's the kind of guy I'm circling at the moment saying, geez, like, or even like a Travis Hamonic at 3 million. Like, could you have gotten another player to contribute what Travis Hamonic does for 750, 900, or $1 million?
Well,
I know it's easier said than done, but those are the two guys I'm looking at saying, like, as this team's trying to get to where it wants to get to, it's going to be on the back of Hughes and Pettersson. And if you're squeezing both of them now, it's like, it's not really a fun spot to be in.
Yeah, just looking at Puckpedia, actually, it says they've got 10.6, but that's with a 24-man roster. So let's take off a league minimum guy. They're 750. So now they're at 11.3. Plus, they'll be able to, Furlan's going to be on LTIR. So there's another 3.5. So they're actually at 14 million when it's all said and done, right? So I think that that's going to...
But how much, like, which one of those guys... Okay, so, like, where does Pettersson come in? Like, even on a bridge deal, he's got to be north of 7, doesn't he?
On a bridge?
2 66-point seasons. Yeah. Like, I'm looking at, like, okay, so Matthew Tkachuk is one of the rare guys that's on a bridge, 3 years, 21 million.
There's the comparison.
Okay, so his point totals, he didn't get to there coming out of entry level. He had 48, 49, 77, although one of those was a 34-goal season, the last one. 266 versus 48, 49, 77. Like, he's got to be right around that 7 number. And then you start to look at Hughes and what he's done. Like, again, totally changed the look and feel of that team. 53 points in his first full NHL season, and then 41 in a shortened year. Like, I know the goals haven't been there on the back end for Hughes, but still, he everything on that power play runs through him. Like, he's vital to your success. And then, another big thing is always ice time. When you're looking at Quinn Hughes and playing 23 a night, like, how much does that come in under 7? Probably a little bit under, but can't be by a lot, can it?
Yeah, those are interesting ones, because I was trying to look for a bridge deal for a defenseman, right? And now there's not a ton of them, right? Like, that are big numbers anyway, right? So, you look at recent ones, there really hasn't been many top-end offensive guys, for sure. Well, first of all, there's not many top-end offensive defensemen like that right away after 2 years of their career. That's what makes Hughes so special. Now, the counter will be that, yes, he puts up some numbers for you, but he was also on the ice, and, we were getting crushed in goals for, goals against. So how do you balance that out, right? That's maybe more of a team stat than it is an individual stat, but if you're on the ice for those, they'll definitely look at it in negotiation. So, and the other thing, fair or not, is they're going to look at Hughes and say, okay, how many defensemen who are under 6 feet tall are legit number one defensemen who can play the big, heavy minutes? Because if you want to get the big numbers, TOI for defensemen, Frank, it's funny, talking to a lot of GMs and assistant GMs and even agents when they negotiate, when it comes to defensemen, time on ice is a major one.
That's why I said 23 a night is...
Right? And so he does still play a lot, but he gets a ton of PP time, as he should. He's an elite offensive player. And I think he'll get better like every young defenseman defensively. But you're right. It's hard to think of a bridge where either one of them, even on
because almost every team goes long-term.
Yeah. On a bridge deal, they're probably...
Like Shabbat is another guy. Like they went long-term.
He went 8 for 8.
Right. There aren't very many D-men like that are elite, that end up, that are playing those minutes, that type of point production, that type of skill set, that end up going bridge. There just aren't.
No. I'm like Pettersson's comments when he said how, hey, if we can't win, and part of me was like, well, yes, but you have to be there. When you're your team's best offensive player and you're missing a key part of the season, my man, it's hard for any team to win like that, because you can't protect against that. There's not that many top 6 forwards in the NHL that if you lose your best forward, that suddenly, oh, well, we got more guys that you can do it for 15 or 20 games. But, Pettersson's comments I found interesting, and I get he's competitive and all that stuff, and that's fine. But he's only been there for really 3 seasons, one which was a waste. He only, unfortunately for him, only got to play 26 games. Mm-hmm. To me, that kind of said bridge all the way through. That because he kind of wants to see it. Now, the advantage that Vancouver has that maybe not a lot of people talk about, I think Thatcher Demko is the up and coming really good young goaltender who can change everything. You make mistakes as a Hughes on defense, guess what? Now you've got Demko, and more often than not, he's going to save it for you. And I think that's going to be the huge thing, because Tampa Bay, if you look at how their team was built, they have elite forwards, elite defensemen, and elite goaltenders. And most teams, like look at Toronto, all their big money's tied up in one position at forward. And Vancouver can have the defenseman, they can have a few forwards, and they have the goaltender. That could be huge for them moving forward. And I think, you know what, if Pettersson, look what Braden Point signed for as a bridge deal. Right? And Braden Point, competitive, scores lots of goals.
Yeah, but there's also the no tax situation there.
Sure, a little bit to a point, but he also, I think, was in a we can win right now position, and he got all his money in a few years anyway. So I think Elias Pettersson and them, if players ultimately want to win, Frank, I'm a big believer in this. If you truly want to win, then put your money where your mouth is, because you can't say I've got to get the max for me, but we still have to be able to win, because the salary cap proves that doesn't work.
Right. So just to follow up, and I just looked quickly, some of the other bridge deals that were in place, Zach Werenski 3 times 5 still hasn't had a productive season like Hughes did points wise. He hasn't broken 50.
Now he's making 9.25.
Right. Then Charlie McAvoy was 3 times 4.9. Mm-hmm. Same thing. He's not nearly the same level producer. 32 points is his max. Sergachev had a 40-point year. He's 3 times 4.8. Again, also no state tax also plays a factor in that. And then there's sort of the medium term deals. I guess at 6 years, you start to get into that longer term. But Ivan Provorov, 6 times 6.75 in Philly. So those are sort of, it's bridge, middle term, and Provorov in that 5 to 6 year range. And then you have the guys like Shabbat that ended up at 8 times 8. That's sort of what the landscape looks like for a guy like Quinn Hughes.
Yeah, it's
not easy.
Jim Betting's got a tough one there, because you're right. I'm not sure they have the cap space to get both of them on long-term contracts. And maybe there's one, maybe there's none. I kind of get the sense that maybe it'll be like a Kane Taves here, that they both get, so they're either both getting long or they're both getting short-term, and they'll go from there. Let's welcome into the woodjerseys.com studio, which you can take to your office or your fan cave. You see, that's a wood jersey right behind me from Boston. Frank has the Toronto one right in front of him if you're watching online. They've got all sorts of new teams available at woodjerseys.com. Check it out. It's great for your take your fan cave to a whole new level at woodjerseys.com. Ty, how you doing?
I am doing good, Jason. I'm doing good. I don't have a wood jersey yet, but it's coming. And the design I'm talking to them about, it might blow you guys away. So I'm really hoping it gets done now that I've hyped it up a little bit.
Whoa. You can't. You got to tell, what are you doing here?
Oh,
are you getting are you getting a custom DFO jersey?
Maybe. Oh, hey. All right, let's dig into buy or sell here. We're going to have in total, I think, 5 more buy or sells until the start of the season. So there's 4 divisions. I figured let's start now with some division previews here. And we'll kick things off with the Central. And I'm going to start at the bottom of the Central Division, where I think the Arizona Coyotes will not only come last in this division, but I think there will be a 10-point gap between them and second last in the division. I think it's going to be a big tank season out in the desert. Jason, you buying or selling?
Oh, yeah, I'm buying huge, man. They just got rid of Dvorak. Man, God love Jacob Chikrin, but, well, they don't have a whole lot of talent left. They'd probably ship out Phil Kessel at some point during the season. Hey, they've done what they said they would do. They have their plan. They've got boatloads of picks. The problem is those picks aren't helping you for how many more years. So I'm not sure what they'll do in the meantime, but I wouldn't be surprised, guys, if we have a Colorado Avalanche like 48 to 56 point season here for Arizona. I just don't see a lot of depth through the lineup.
Yeah, I was going to say 10. I'm going to say if it's not 20, like my head would be sewn to the floor. Like that's how shocked I would be.
So you're also buying on the 10-point gap. At first, I thought you were going to call me crazy the way your eyebrows went all wonky.
No, I'm like, I'm buying. And I think it's going to be way bigger than 10. Like, I think Chicago is improved again, especially if Larry plays. Like, I'm trying to think who would even be in their vicinity. I think Winnipeg could be one of the best teams in the league. Minnesota gets Kaprizov done. They're going to be up there. St. Louis is still going to be competitive. Colorado is really good. I think Dallas could be a playoff team. Like, who is in their neighborhood? It's going to be Nashville, and like that's it. But I still think Nashville, like they're not going to be terrible. Yeah. They're just going to be there. So, geez, I don't know. It could be 25. I wouldn't be shocked to see a 25-point gap.
I would love to know when the last time a team started the season with two goalies. Both their goalies are on league minimum contracts. I don't think that would have ever happened in the Cap era.
I don't think it has, and I'm just trying to think of some other teams that haven't really spent a lot. I think I covered the Flyers one year where they had each guy on like $1 million or 1-2 somewhere around there, but it wasn't a ton.
Let's go from the bottom right up to the top. I think 1-2 in this division, and actually based on your comments, Frank, I think you'll buy on this one. 1-2 in the division is going to be Colorado, Winnipeg in some sort of order. You buying or selling?
I'm buying, but the team I'm wondering about is Minnesota. Like, we forget how freaking good that team was last year. Like, it was like the final 4 days of the season, they were still in the President's Trophy race. And that was in a division with Colorado and Vegas. I will buy and say yes, Colorado, Winnipeg 1-2, but that's my caveat is I'm wondering about Minnie.
As far as, so you're buying that those two are going to finish ahead of Minnie?
I'm buying that the 1-2 in that division, whether it's Colorado or Winnipeg, it's going to be one of those two teams or those two teams.
But you're just giving an honorable mention to Minnesota.
Yeah, I'm saying that's the team that makes me think.
Okay. I'm going to sell and say the Dallas Stars surprise. I think the Dallas Stars, they had a lot of key guys. They had COVID, which crushed their team. Tyler Seguin, basically one of their offensive guys, out for the entire season. I think Dallas is going to find a way to squeeze into the top two. I think that division, Frank said it very well. Like, it's going to be highly competitive. And I was just looking up when Colorado had 48 points, they were 31 behind Dallas, who finished sixth that year in that division. So we could have, that many teams in one division with 79 plus points, all battling it out. And I think we could see that again, which is going to make it even harder for Arizona because their division, they're going to play a lot of games there. But I think the Dallas Stars, I'll take them in the top two.
I asked this question a few weeks ago, and Frank, I actually know what your answer is going to be on this one, but Gregor, I'll be interested in your take here. I wonder if this Kaprizov thing lingers into the season, if we could see the Minnesota Wild take a step back. And I think this division is going to be really, really competitive. I'm going to say the Kaprizov thing lingers and the Wild end up out of the playoffs this season because they get off to a slow start. Jason, you buying or selling?
Man, it was funny because I was looking at Pittsburgh the other day, and if they get off to a slow start in that division, it's just the divisions are tough, some of them. And so, Frank's caveat about the visa really is what puts the Kaprizov thing, because if it stretches, all of a sudden he's not here on the 13th, and then he's not here on the 20th, and now he's not, the 29th, and all of a sudden he misses some games. Now, he's a young player, but when you play catch-up in the NHL, I find it's almost a wasted season. There's been very few players who have held out and missed like the first 3 weeks or month of the year and were able to have a really good season. Like, it's hard.
He might be the exception.
Yeah, he might be,
he's been skating the entire summer with CSKA and Moscow. Like, he's actually, I think he's still training with them.
Yeah, a lot. At the moment, Nylander skated the whole time, and still when he came there was because he's the last guy who's held out for an extended period of time. Minnesota miss. That division's tight. So you know what? I'll buy. If he's not here to start the season, they miss.
Frank, if Kaprizov's not here to start the season, the Wild miss the playoffs. Buy or sell?
So
I see. And my take on it is I look around that division and Chicago got so much better. St. Louis got a lot better as well. They picked up Buchnevich and Brandon Saad. I think Dallas is going to be healthy and they should be better as well. I just see a bunch of teams that got better. And if their best player's not here to start the year, I can't see Minnesota being better. And I'm not sure how much they did over the offseason to make themselves better as well on top of that. Moving along here to our next question. We're going to dig into a couple of specific players. Gregor, you gave some love to the Dallas Stars. I'm going to go down that path as well. A healthy Tyler Seguin is rejuvenated and comes top 15 in league scoring. This might be a nice tie-in for fan tracks as well for those who play fantasy hockey. But Jason, buying or selling? Healthy Seguin, top 15 in scoring.
Top 15, which means you're well, nowadays you're definitely an 80-point guy. God, a lot of the top 10, 15 players are teammates, right? So who's going to be his running mate is now because what did he score in 2020? Like 50 points? I'm going to say no, he's not top 15. It's been, I'd love to see it, but I don't see it happening.
I'm selling, and I don't think there's really even much of a chance. Like,
really,
I know that there was, there's just been significant injury concern for a while with him. And I think with how grueling that process was that he, took to get back, like, I don't know how long he was on crutches or, it was almost like that's how he didn't walk for a really long time. And I know he's been training and skating for a while, but that was a really significant surgery. He was already I don't know how much he was dealing with it and impacting him. But his best year, 40 goals, 78 points, 80, 84.
Last time he played 82 games, he had 80 points.
Yeah, I don't see it.
Going to the last one here, you touched on the Nashville Predators a little bit, Frank, saying they might not be in, that upper half of the division. But between the pipes, I love UC Saros. He had a crazy finish to the season as well. I'm going to say UC Saros comes top 5 in Vezina voting this season. Buy or sell, Frank?
I'll buy that. He's really good. And I also think that's an amazing contract.
Yeah.
When you look at $5 million times 4 years, and then you look at, and I know Igor Shesterkin is a really good player, really good goalie, but he gets 4 years, same term at 5.66, and has only played 47 NHL games. That Saros deal is super team friendly for a while.
Great contract. I am going to sell. I think Nashville's, well, I don't see them as a playoff team. And when you're going to have guys like Thatcher Demko, obviously Vasilevsky every year is going to be in the conversation. Hellebuck's going to be in the conversation. Then there's going to be some guys in other divisions for sure. I'm going to say no, that he can have a decent year, but I just think that Nashville's overall team success will limit his ability to be top 5.
There you go. That is buy or sell. This week it is presented to you by DoorDash. First-time users of the app can use the promo code RundownDD, and it gets you not only 25% off your order, but no delivery fees as well. DoorDash, ding dong.
I wanted to bring up two things off of that buy or sell that caught my ear. One guy I also wanted to mention, if you're like to place some long shot bets, and I don't know what the odds are for this trophy specifically, but Darcy Kemper I would include in the Vezina Trophy conversation. And Jay, you hit on Pittsburgh. Sidney Crosby obviously going to miss 6 weeks after undergoing wrist surgery. That takes him out probably for the first week to 10 days of the regular season. And why that's going to be interesting in Pittsburgh is we're going to get a glimpse of what the future might look like for the Penguins, not having Crosby, not having Malkin. Malkin underwent surgery for his, I believe it was a torn ACL. And so he's out, I think until late January, early February is my sort of target for Evgeny Malkin. He wants to play, not surprisingly, in the Olympics. So, the push to get back for the Olympics means you probably need to play a handful of games before going over to Beijing. So that's, sort of the time frame I would circle, if not a little bit sooner for Malkin getting back.
Well, and the key thing, Frank, in the Pittsburgh press release was minimum 6 weeks, which makes me wonder, like, Sidney Crosby, like, he maybe more than most other players really understands the nuances of his own body. He's very protective of his own body. He does, like, people were like, well, why'd they wait till the last minute? Because he wanted to exercise every other option. Every surgery that you have, there's the slight chance something goes wrong, right? Like there's been.
Well, that's why it always cracks me up whenever I see the press release that says underwent successful surgery. How do you know? Like, seriously, why did teams say that? How about just underwent surgery? You don't know that it was successful. The doctor doesn't know. The player doesn't know. Like, it may be successful to start and it may fall apart. Like, you really have no idea. And you're right. I think it's such an important point. Minimum 6 weeks. Like, and I'm also, by the way, not to play conspiracy theorist, I'm not entirely convinced that it was an old injury. Like, I don't know if this, did he hurt at training? Was there something, off ice that it seems very out of character for Sid to wait until now to have surgery.
Okay. It's definitely one to watch for Pittsburgh. And, what's the future going to look like? Well, hate to spoil the party for Pens fans. All you got to do is go down the list of teams when they lose superstar players, even late in their careers. Detroit Red Wings, San Jose Sharks. Go down the list of teams that were good. And eventually, like, hey, you got to rebuild. You got to pay the piper, unless they could find a way somehow to, because they kind of avoided it a little bit, but they went from Lemieux to Jagger to Crosby, but they still, I shouldn't say they avoided it. They had 4 years of top 5 picks, so obviously they didn't avoid it.
They almost lost their franchise kind of because of it.
Pretty much no one can do it. So Penguins fans have had an unbelievable run, like really for ever since the 1990s. Like, they had 4 bad years, sure, but for the most part, your team has been one of the best teams in the NHL in that time period. And when those two leave, and it might not be for a few years, there's going to be a fallback. Chicago had a fallback, and they still had Kane and Taves because they lost Hossa and Seabrook and
It's just a question of when. I honestly, with Malkin and with Letang, when you look at those two guys and they're entering the final years of their deals, like, this could really be, I think we'll have a pretty good idea of how quickly we get to that point based on the way this season plays out by January. You'll know whether it makes sense for Malkin to re-sign. You'll know whether it makes sense for Letang to re-sign. And if not, do they just shake their hand and say, thank you for helping deliver 3 Stanley Cups to our city, and, we wish you the best. Like, and then how does Sid react to all that? Like, this season is sort of where the rubber meets the road.
Yeah, it'll be fascinating one. And they're in a tough division. Philly, Washington, Carolina, the Islanders, the Rangers. Some people are saying don't sleep on the Devils. Well, I'll see it when I believe it, but I think they might be more competitive for sure. Can they be a playoff team? Not sure I'm there yet, but I really like Blackwood. They got some young guys coming. They brought in Dougie Hamilton. They've definitely improved. There's no question about that. So Pittsburgh, if you don't have Malkin, like you said, Frank, for a long first half of the season, and Crosby, if that stretches to 2 or 3 weeks, suddenly you find yourself in a hole that I think, unlike most years, it's going to be harder to dig out of in that division, similar to Minnesota potentially in their division, which makes it a lot of fun. That was good, Frank. We've got Cammy Granato, Hall of Famer, joining us on Friday's pod, so we look forward to that. Once again, the DFO Rundown presented by FanTrack. It's the most customizable fantasy platform in the industry, offering the greatest fan experience. If you and your buddies want to put together a league, whether it's a keeper league, a redraft league, check it out at FanTrax. That's FanTrax.com. Frank, we'll talk to you on Friday.
Thanks for listening to the DFO Rundown with Seravalli and Gregor. Keep it locked on dailyfaceoff.com and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts from to never miss an episode. Delivered by DoorDash.